Hello, my name is Tshidi Madia from Team EWN. It's a new year. And as with the start of every new year, you have a State of the Nation address. Every February, the president takes to the podium in Parliament, usually to deliver his message for the country. This particular message focuses on the list of priorities. They'll look back at the previous year. What have been the wins? What are the challenges? Just to give you a bit of a backdrop though, this particular SONA, like the past few, is taking place at the Cape Town City Hall. Remember, there was that fire that gutted parts of Parliament back in 2022, and ever since then, we've returned year on year to City Hall while the dome is being fixed. Is the dome not being fixed? Is Parliament ready? Parliament not ready? While that debate rages on, we go to the City Hall to listen to the head of state, and at 7 o'clock, he will then address the nation. What do I expect the president to say? I think in a different world, he would have had good news, right? As far as ESCOM is concerned. He would have been able to stand before the nation and say, we did it. Because it came so close to a year without load shedding. Of course, that was shattered last week when ESCOM announced that it would go into load shedding. So that's quite a pitiful thing. But I do think that he will look at what's happened with ESCOM and see it as a win, bringing it closer to presidency, and the work that's been done in order to try and stabilize energy is something that I think the president will speak of in good light. I do expect more of the same as far as the priorities. Unemployment is an issue. Local government, and I'll come back to local government and why it is critical in this particular SONA and the year ahead. I do expect the president to speak about water. Water replaces ESCOM, if you may, as far as urgency and emergency, whichever way you want to phrase it, is concerned, because we've seen Johannesburg, and they praise Johannesburg as being the most industrial, the most, forward-thinking, if you speak of economies on the continent. It doesn't have water. Water throttling is part now of the narrative for people who live in Joburg. That's something that needs national intervention, and we will see that move, and we'll hear that in the president's speech, that water is something that we need to recognize. Remember, South Africa is a water-scarce country as it is, so I do think that that will be there. As I said, unemployment, of course. Local government, we're headed towards local government elections, 2026. Political parties already have started the work to get ready to vie for, obviously, your support. But I do think that, by and large, people are worried about the state of our municipalities, their abilities to govern, to deliver services, the state of the roads around some parts of our cities and towns. All of those things require, again, urgent attention, again, national intervention. So I do think that it will be a big talking point. But I don't think we've ever had a SONA where there's so much happening around us in the geopolitical space. So I do think that this is a SONA that will be delivered, overshadowed, dominated, if you may, by what's happening outside of us that involves us, influences us, as he speaks to the nation. I'll start with the DRC. I think that's the most pressing, and I think the country's still a little bit shell-shocked, right? The highest number of soldiers that we've lost in the DRC since they've been out in Goma. As it stands, we don't actually have an answer as to how South Africa will extract the wounded and those who've perished in the front line in combat, be it called a peacekeeping mission, whatever the mandate is by United Nations and SADC. South Africa has lost soldiers. There are loved ones who are anxiously waiting, loved ones who are desperately waiting for answers about what the way forward. Of course, this as attempts to find a safe passage out of Goma are continuing. So I think the president, it'll be very difficult for me to see the president stand before the nation and not have answers. So he urgently needs to have some sort of a pathway, some sort of an answer about what happens to our troops that are on the front line. Do you bring them back? And when you bring them back, what does that look like? These are now the active troops, those who want to return home. We need answers about what happens to those. We need answers about questions of equipment, about capacity. We need answers about the wounded and, most importantly, the perished. I hear it is difficult terrain. So families are absolutely stressed about not knowing what's happening on the ground. Are their loved ones having access to food, water? You don't know if they're well resourced. And those are things that the president needs to give some sort of insights into. My general sentiment about this whole DRC matter, as an aside, has been it's mishandled. South Africa tends to communicate in a way where it needs to go back and clarify and over-clarify and clarify its messaging. That tells you that that's a problem. People often say in wartime, communications is also a vital tool. Media is a vital tool. I don't think they've used it wisely. We've seen them literally triple over each other and trying to communicate the little communication that we've gotten. So the hope really when the president speaks on Thursday is that here we're given something that is satisfactory about what transpired and what the way forward is. It also happens with Donald Trump. Yes, Donald Trump is now back in the White House. I think in the past it wouldn't have mattered that Donald Trump has been re-elected into office, that he's back as the US's president and he's in the White House. But it matters at this particular point of time, at this SONA, because this week Donald Trump did what he does best. Came out shooting off his mouth and giving an uninformed opinion, a really dangerous opinion of what's happening in the country and putting it on a global stage. So he's weighed in on expropriation without compensation. Completely wrong, off the mark, ill-informed. Highly ill-informed. He is the leader of the United States. He's made these comments. South Africa, again, will stand before the nation and see. The president has released statements. Many of our leaders have reacted, including those who started the fear-mongering and peddling of lies. They, too, are now going, oh, no, Mr. Trump, don't this, don't that. Who started this? So it's backfired there, which is a good thing. However, it's something that I think the president will now have to take into consideration and speak to. This SONA also happens with South Africa chairing and hosting the G20 summit, which might actually see Donald Trump finally making his way to South Africa and realizing that what he's been saying about our beautiful country is lies, and more lies. I imagine that that particular part of what Trump has been saying, the G20, will definitely find expression in the president's speech. I think Middle East as well, because part of what's happening with the DRC is connected to Rwanda. What's happening with Donald Trump is connected to, according to some people, to Israel. Remember, South Africa picked this big fight when it went to the ICJ, fighting for what is a just cause for Palestinians, but it's garnered South Africa enemies. Many people often say to me, they don't think South Africa understands what it's triggered and what it would be like for South Africa to face off with it. Some people believe that what's happening with Rwanda and South Africa, despite that you've been seeing Kagame's anger. Paul Kagame's been really angry. He's angry publicly over the mishandling of communication by our government. Minister Angie Motshekga's language, warning, threatening language, wasn't right. The statement that didn't seem to be vetted from presidency, speaking about his army, his troops as a militia, that wasn't right. That's not done. Those things are errors on our part. But I think his response for some people is tied to what they define as the known unknown, the other players that aren't been spoken of, that, there's an Israel sprinkling, these allegations in that Rwanda camp. Obviously with Donald Trump as well, some will say to you, I wonder how much of this is linked to the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the fact that South Africa has picked a fight. So there's a lot of speculation. So I do think because of that and because of what we've sought to do, Middle East will definitely be part and parcel of the conversation. I want to get to GNU now. I think, first of all, the fact that they've gotten this far is actually a win for them. And I think President Cyril Ramaphosa will position it that way. He'll look at it that way. But speaking of the same GNU, I don't think they've ever actually sat down to have that conversation about the policies, right? To align the policies in the lead up to this particular SONA. You saw the DA, endless media briefings, endless complaints about how it was treated in the GNU. So the conversations in aligning on foreign policy, aligning on many avenues, on many issues, it hasn't actually happened. So the question would be, as the DA sits in that audience and listens to the president's SONA, what buy-in do you have? Because you didn't sit and deliberate over what you want, what your vision is. And this speaks to all the other parties in the GNU, including the ANC. You haven't sat down to align your vision. So that's part of the problem. And having said that, what we have seen though, again, the backdrop conversation for me is that the GNU has had multiple spats, particularly between the two bigger parties, the ANC and the DA. They disagree on so many things. So one questions how long the GNU will hold. I think a lot of people don't have faith that the GNU will continue holding, and that's something that they need to work at. In my head, the clearinghouse, that mechanism, is where a lot of the issues, a lot of the butting of heads should have been dealt with before they get to government, so that by the time they're dealt with at a government level, that it's seamless, that it's smooth processing, that you're not having ministers having it out on social media. You want to see a cohesive unit as far as government's concerned. So I do think that GNU could be positioned mention it as a win, but I definitely think that the challenges there are very clear. The biggest crisis that I think the president does have, though, in delivering this SONA isn't that it's same for South Africans. Yay, we've been given so many messages, and the president is good at storytelling. Tintswalo came from SONA. I think the biggest crisis that he has is believability, right? They've lost so much trust from the public, from citizens, with these plans that they present before the country year on year. That's something that he has to confront. And I also think that in the messaging, it's often not clear enough, it's not convincing enough. And those are the issues that will remain with what he delivers when he takes to the nation on Thursday.